Have you ever bought shares in a company or maybe donated to a charity you believe in and then, stopped and wondered, who's really looking out for my interests here?
Mm.
You put your trust, maybe your money, your faith into an organization. But what actually ensures that trust isn't just, well, a leap of faith? Today, we're taking a deep dive into corporate governance. Now, I know that might sound like one of those really dry technical phrases.
Something guaranteed to make eyes glaze over.
Exactly. But trust me, it's anything but. At its heart, governance is really about fundamental questions. Things like power, trust, and accountability. And not just in giant corporations, but in any organization. Your local charity, the big companies, everything. So our mission today, we want to cut through the jargon. We're using a detailed study text on governance principles. And we're going to, light up the core ideas, maybe expose some surprising
Oh,
conflict.
there are definitely conflicts.
And show you exactly why this topic is crucial. If you invest, if you work somewhere, if you just interact with any organization, this matters. We'll dig into how these places are actually directed and controlled and what that really means for you.
It's a genuinely fascinating area, I think, because it touches the very bedrock of how organizations function, or at least how they should function, ethically, responsibly, and we'll see how these principles, they kind of apply universally. Private companies, public services, even nonprofits.
Okay, so let's strip it right back. When we say governance, what are we really talking about? Like, what's the essential point?
Well, the classic starting point is often the Cadbury Report, back in '92. It defined it pretty simply. The system by which companies are directed and controlled.
Directed and controlled. Okay.
But, and this is crucial, it immediately got broader than just, say, shareholders. It's also about those beyond the company boundaries, what we now generally call stakeholders.
Ah, right. So employees, customers, the community.
Exactly. It brings in that whole dimension of social responsibility. So a more complete idea is being directed and controlled in the interests of shareholders and other stakeholders.
That really does widen the lens, doesn't it? It's not just about the owners anymore, but the whole impact. And, this leads straight into something I found genuinely surprising in our sources, this inherent tension between ownership and control.
Absolutely. It's fundamental. Think about how companies evolved. Those joint stock companies from the 19th century, they're dominant now.
Right.
So here's the aha moment, as you called it. The shareholders, they're the principals. They own the company, but they delegate the day-to-day running, the control, to professional managers, the agents, basically the board of directors.
Okay, but here's the bit that really made me sit up. And honestly, it's a bit startling. Our sources show that directors, the people in charge, often own less than 1% of the shares in the UK's biggest companies.
It's tiny, often.
And get this. Only 4 out of 10 directors own any shares at all in the business they run. So if you're a shareholder, you're trusting your money to people with almost no skin in the game financially.
Precisely. And that creates this immediate potential conflict of interest. It's the classic principal-agent problem.
How do you make sure the agents, the managers, act in the best interests of the principals, the owners, when their own incentives might be totally different?
That's the million-dollar question governance tries to answer, is try to bridge that gap of trust. You're asking people to trust strangers with their wealth, which is, well, quite a vulnerable position when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is.
But there's a strong business reason to get it right. People talk about the governance dividend.
A governance dividend. Okay, I like the sound of that. What does it mean in practice? How does it pay off?
It means better management, fundamentally.
Yeah.
Which usually leads to better financial performance and often a higher share price.
So investors actually look for this.
Oh, definitely. Especially the big institutional investors. They actively seek out companies with strong governance. They see it as a sign of a well-run, more resilient business, a safer bet for the long term.
And it's not just about the money, is it? There's also this idea of a social responsibility dividend.
Exactly. A company that acts responsibly, that thinks about its stakeholders, it just becomes more attractive to customers, to potential employees, and yes, to investors too. This can boost revenues, strengthen the brand, and yeah, potentially lift the share price. So good governance isn't just about avoiding scandals. It's actually about creating value in a much broader sense.
That's a really powerful case for doing things properly. And thinking about value leads us naturally to the ethical side of things. Our sources really stress that individual ethics, a person's moral stance, that's the absolute foundation of governance.
That's spot on. You can have all the codes and rules in the world, but it's the individuals, their integrity, their ethical compass that puts those principles into action. Without that personal commitment, the whole structure can just crumble. Trust disappears.
Okay, so let's unpack some of these core ethical virtues. First up, fairness. What does that look like?
Fairness means, well, treating internal stakeholders equally, being even-handed with external ones, making equitable judgments, not playing favorites.
Then openness or transparency. Sounds obvious, but why is it so fundamental?
It should be the default position, really. Providing information rather than hiding it. Especially in that agency relationship we talked about, owners need to know what managers are doing. It builds trust. It demystifies things.
And for the numbers side, probity and honesty.
Absolutely essential. You need that for financial reporting to mean anything. It's about accuracy, truthfulness, building trust in the finance team, the figures they produce. It's a baseline ethical stance.
I thought skepticism being listed as a virtue was really interesting. It sounds a bit negative, maybe?
Not at all. It means having a questioning mind, being willing to challenge, to critically assess the evidence, especially for non-executive directors. Their job is partly to challenge management, right? To ask the awkward questions. That requires healthy skepticism.
Makes sense. And independence.
That's crucial for avoiding undue influence. Think about non-execs again, or auditors. They need to be objective, make decisions based on the organization's best interests, not because they owe someone a favor or are too close to management.
Right. No conflicts of interest.
Ideally, yes.
Right.
And finally, you've got responsibility and accountability.
Which means?
Being willing to accept liability for your decisions, having clear roles so you know who is responsible for what, and being obliged to explain your actions, to account for them. And integrity sort of ties it all together.
How so?
Integrity is that steadfast adherence to strict ethical standards, the highest levels of professionalism, probity. It's the unwavering moral compass guiding everything else.
Okay, to make this really concrete, let's look at some examples where things went wrong. The Sibir Energy scandal, for instance. This was a Russian oil company.
Yeah, and they controversially planned to buy completely unrelated properties, a Moscow hotel, a construction project from a major shareholder, a huge step away from their core oil business.
So right away, alarm bells.
Definitely. People immediately questioned the legitimacy. Was this really good for the company or just for that shareholder? Minority shareholders felt ignored. It screamed lack of transparency, lack of fairness.
And the CEO.
Initially defended it, but then he got suspended when it turned out the big shareholder actually owed Sibir Energy over $300 million.
Wow. So if you were a small shareholder.
Your trust was completely betrayed. Your investment potentially funneled into a questionable deal benefiting one insider. The fallout was massive. Scandal headlines, the stock exchange suspended trading, the share price tanked down almost 80%.
A brutal lesson in what happens when you ignore probity, transparency, fairness.
Absolutely. And then there's the case of Lord Brown, former CEO of BP. He resigned after admitting in court he'd been untruthful about his private life.
Now, that wasn't a direct business deal gone bad.
No. But his personal reputation was so damaged, it was seen as inevitably harming BP's standing. It just highlights how crucial personal integrity is for leaders, even beyond specific business decisions. Reputation matters.
Let's take a hypothetical one from the sources. Fred the accountant. Fred gives his golfing buddies lower charges. He kind of guesses billing instead of keeping proper records. And he makes a point of not prying too far into his clients' affairs.
Ah, yes, Fred.
His clients actually like that he doesn't ask too many awkward questions, even if it leads to, say, tax irregularities that they are ultimately on the hook for. How is Fred doing on those ethical virtues?
Well, Fred's failing quite badly, isn't he? Giving mates lower charges. That violates fairness, guessing bills. That lacks transparency and probity.
And the not prying too far.
That's a big one. While his clients might appreciate the easy ride, it's a fundamental breach of probity and professional responsibility. He can't prepare accurate tax returns without the full picture. He's basically enabling potential dishonesty.
Even if the clients are initially happy.
Exactly. It undermines trust in the long run. His own reputation, his integrity, it's all being eroded, even if it seems convenient in the short term.
These examples really hit home. Good governance isn't just theory, is it? It's about real actions, real consequences. But, okay, it's not just for huge public companies. Governance applies much more broadly.
That's right. You've got the private sector, mostly aiming for profit. You've got charities focused on benevolent aims. And then the public sector, delivering services that, for-profit companies might not provide.
So, In the public sector, who are the principals? It's not shareholders. How does that change the dynamic?
It makes it way more complex. The principals are often taxpayers, service users.
Mhm.
You've got multiple groups with potentially conflicting interests.
Like,
Well, think about taxpayers disagreeing on how much should be spent on healthcare versus roads, for instance. The agent, the public body, has a really tough job trying to satisfy everyone. Objectives can be tangled, contested.
and how do they measure success? Our sources mention the three E's.
Right. Economy, effectiveness, and efficiency. Economy is about cost, doing it cheaply, on budget. Effectiveness is about results, delivering the service it's supposed to. And efficiency is about optimizing resources, getting the most bang for your buck. It all boils down to value for money.
Okay. Now, a really common debate in public sector governance is privatization. Policies swing back and forth, don't they, depending on the government? The UK Post Office in 2013 is cited. What are the arguments for and against?
Well, proponents of privatization argue it brings business discipline, more efficiency because of the profit motive, maybe more competition leading to better value, better management, perhaps even better governance structures.
But there's a strong pushback too, right? Often based on social values.
Absolutely. The counterargument is often that profit shouldn't be the main goal for essential services like health or maybe postal services. There are worries competition could harm quality or universal access. Some things, they argue, should just stay under state control to ensure fairness for everyone.
It's a really intense debate, as the source says, deeply felt on both sides.
And enduring. It doesn't go away.
Okay, what about the third sector, not-for-profits, NGOs?
Right. These organizations fill gaps, delivering services the other two sectors don't cover, like the Red Cross, for example. Here, the agency relationship is often between the NGO and its donors.
And the governance challenge there.
Well, there's no profit motive in the same way, no residual claims for owners, and no stock market, so no threat of takeover if management messes up. This raises concerns about maybe managers pursuing their own pet projects or mission drift, or just not being efficient because those external pressures aren't there.
And quickly, quangos. Quasi-autonomous, non-governmental organizations, like the Forestry Commission example.
Yeah, these are funded by taxpayers but operate at arm's length from direct government control. They offer expertise, some independence. But the criticism often is about blurred reporting lines.
Blurred lines.
Who are they really accountable to? They often report to many principals, government departments, maybe the public, specific user groups. It can make pinning down accountability quite tricky sometimes. You wonder who's actually holding the reins.
Okay, so we've seen how governance plays out across different sectors. Let's zoom back in now on that core conflict we touched on earlier. Agency theory. Let's really unpack the mechanics.
Right. So just to recap, an agent, the manager, works for a principal, the owner or shareholder, to do a job. Agency is just that relationship.
And the problem.
The problem, as our source puts it, is the separation of goals. Shareholders generally want wealth maximization, long-term value. Managers, the agents, might have different personal objectives, a bigger salary, more status, maybe focusing on short-term results that look good now, even if they aren't best for the long haul.
And this mismatch, this potential conflict, leads to what are called agency costs. What are those exactly? How do they hit the owners?
Agency costs are basically all the costs the principals, the owners, have to bear in monitoring agency behavior because of a lack of trust. They're real costs, money, time, resources that ultimately reduce the company's value.
Can you give some quick examples? Things owners pay for.
Sure. Think about paying for external auditors to check the books. The cost of management spending time preparing detailed annual reports and risk assessments just for shareholders. Even the time executives spend in meetings with analysts explaining strategy, it's all effort, all cost, aimed at making sure managers are aligned with owners.
And there's another layer, residual loss. This sounds like the ultimate perk problem.
It kind of is. Residual loss is a specific type of agency cost. It's when directors basically help themselves to extras, furnishing themselves with expensive cars and planes, etc., things beyond their official pay package.
So perks that aren't part of the deal.
Exactly. It's a direct drain on shareholder value. Money that could have been profit or reinvested just vanishes into executive luxuries.
Let's make this concrete with that Globeline case study from the sources. This was a phone company, right? Grew really fast through acquisitions.
Yeah, very aggressive growth through acquisition strategy. They bought over 60 companies funding nearly all of it with company shares.
Which sounds good maybe, but
But it created huge management challenges.
mm,
Strained resources stretched the internal audit thin.
yeah.
And while shareholders liked the rising stock price initially, some started complaining they couldn't understand the annual reports. The accounting for all those acquisitions got really complex. So, transparency issues right there. Accountability questions.
And the CEO, Ben Mervyn, big personality.
Very charismatic, the visionary leader. Earned a fortune over $77 million in 3 years. Plus a severance deal that gave him $1.5 million a year for life and lifetime use of the corporate jet.
A jet for life.
Yeah, and apparently he dominated the board. They rarely challenged him. Then, a whistleblower pops up alleging
Right.
financial wrongdoing.
Okay, so connect this back to agency costs and residual loss.
It's glaringly obvious here, isn't it? Mervyn's huge pay packet, that corporate jet for life, classic examples of potential agency costs, maybe even residual loss, depending on how it was structured. The opaque reports, definitely an agency cost shareholders couldn't easily monitor performance.
What about the risky strategy?
The aggressive acquisition strategy itself, with all its integration risks and lack of clarity, could be seen as an agency cost if it wasn't truly aligned with long-term shareholder value. And the fact the board didn't challenge him, that shows a breakdown in the monitoring mechanism, a failure to control the agent.
So if you're a shareholder watching this train wreck, what can you actually do, especially against a CEO that powerful?
Well, the ultimate weapon is selling your shares. Divestment. If enough people do it, it hits the share price, makes it harder to raise capital. That sends a message.
Less drastic options.
You can try communication, persuasion, especially if you're a large institutional investor. Pension funds, insurance companies, they own big chunks of shares, so they have more clout. They can demand meetings, express concerns.
And this shareholder activism thing.
Right. That's where shareholders get more organized. They might propose resolutions at the annual meeting, maybe try to vote down the pay report, or refuse to reappoint directors they see as conflicted.
Like the guy in the Globeline case who chaired the audit committee but also used the corporate jet a lot.
Exactly. A clear potential conflict.
Right.
And beyond direct action, there's always the backdrop of external rules regulations, corporate governance codes, like the UK Corporate Governance Code. Even if it's comply or explain, companies don't like having to explain why they're not following best practice. Reputation matters.
That leads us really nicely into our final section. We focused a lot on agency theory, that owner-manager tension. But let's broaden the lens now to stakeholder theory. This offers a much wider view, doesn't it?
It really does. Agency theory can be quite narrow, just focused on owners versus managers. Stakeholder theory says, hang on, there are lots of other groups involved. It considers any person or group that can affect or be affected by the policies or activities of an organization.
So employees, customers, suppliers, the local community.
All of them. And what's really interesting is that looking after these stakeholders isn't just, a nice thing to do, a feel-good exercise. Our sources suggest it can actually be a necessary outcome of agency theory itself.
How does that work? How does caring about, say, employees actually help the shareholders?
Well, think about it. Treating employees well boosts morale, productivity, helps attract top talent, good customer relations, builds loyalty, enhances reputation, stable supplier relationships, ensures smooth operations. Caring about the community, improves public perception, might attract ethical investors.
So it all feeds back.
Exactly. It can ultimately benefit the company's long-term performance and value, which is what the shareholders, the principals, want. So it's actually good business, not just good ethics. The two can align.
Okay, so who are the key stakeholders we should think about, internal and external?
Internally, you've got the directors themselves, the company secretary, managers below board level, all the employees, trade unions too. They all have claims pay, job security, working conditions, influence.
And external.
Lots.
Yeah.
Auditors, regulators, the government, the stock exchange, small individual investors, and crucially, those institutional investors. We mentioned the pension funds, insurance firms, mutual funds. Because they hold such large stakes, they can exert significant influence on corporate policy. They also have their own governance duties to the people whose money they manage.
This has been a really, really insightful deep dive. Fantastic stuff. Let's just quickly recap the main points.
Okay, so we learned that corporate governance is essentially the system for directing and controlling organizations. It's all about tackling that fundamental tension between owners and managers, the principal-agent problem.
Right.
We saw the key ethical principles: fairness, openness, honesty, skepticism, independence, responsibility, integrity. They're not just nice to haves, they're the absolute foundation for it to work.
And we saw these ideas aren't just for massive corporations. They apply right across the board, private, public, nonprofit sectors, each with its own unique twists and challenges, especially around who the principals really are.
Yeah, and we used agency theory to get under the hood of those conflicts and costs. Before widening the view with stakeholder theory, acknowledging that companies impact and are accountable to a much broader range of groups than just their owners.
And remember, this isn't just theoretical business chat. This stuff really impacts you. Where you might invest your savings, the quality of the public services you rely on, the ethical standards of the places you work for or buy from. It touches daily life.
It absolutely does.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Given these built-in conflicts we've talked about and how complex global organizations are getting with these blurred reporting lines cropping up everywhere, how much responsibility really lies with individuals, managers, directors, employees, versus just relying on the systems to ensure good governance?
That's a great question. And maybe, what new kinds of oversight or accountability structures do we need in this complex world to make sure all stakeholders are truly being considered?
Something to think about. As you go about your week, maybe take a look at the organizations you interact with. Could be your kid's school board, a local charity, your own workplace. Try looking at them through this governance lens. Who seems to be in charge? Whose interests are they really serving? You might be surprised by what you start to notice.